Good morning and welcome to Moments with Moms. I'm so glad you joined us today. I'm Paula Scholart. I'm your host. And for the past several months, I have been interviewing different moms who have a story to tell about their struggles with motherhood, some challenging times, difficult times, and God's faithfulness to them in their journey. So today we do have a special guest with us. And this is a really precious mom that I have known for quite a few years. And she's married to this really crazy guy, Ben. We all love him. And if you're in a room with him, you just can't help but laugh. And she has two sons, and they're in fifth grade now. And she's going to tell us a very unique story that is her story in motherhood. So I'm going to bring Lisa on. Hi, Lisa. Thank you for
Good
good
morning.
morning. Thank you for joining us today. This is Lisa Leach. And so, Lisa, let's just start from the very beginning. I know that because I know a little bit about your story, I know that you did have some struggles um, getting pregnant in early on.
Mhm.
So tell us a little bit about that.
So my husband and I had tried to have a baby for a while, not long after we got married. That was definitely something that I really wanted, was a baby. And that wasn't working so well. So we had sought some medical assistance, and we did IUI. And the first one was unsuccessful. And the second one, it was actually during VBS when
I
we
remember
were
that.
going for the second one. And the night before, we all prayed. And the day of the IUI, the doctor said, this one just doesn't look like it's going to work. So don't get your hopes up with this one. So we were a little bit surprised when 2 weeks later we found out that we were indeed pregnant. And then on my birthday of that year, we found we got to hear two heartbeats, not just one. So
So God gave you two special gifts, right?
exactly.
That's awesome. Okay, so I know that, and I think a lot of women know that when you have twins, there can be problems and complications. So tell us a little bit about your story and your pregnancy with your twins.
So my pregnancy went really well up until when it didn't. So the first 30 weeks were great. I wasn't sick a day. The only problem I had was heartburn. I was really in great shape. Thought, I can do this long term. My goal was to get to 36 weeks. With twins, that's where you want to be.
Right.
So that would have taken us to, their due date was March 17th, but we were expecting them around February 16th or so. And on January 5th, I was sick. So I stayed home from work that day, and I actually had an appointment with a specialist that morning, just because of the twins, and I was high risk because I was old. I was 35. I was considered high risk at 35. So I had an appointment that morning. Everything was fine. And that night, I didn't know what was going on. I was having some contractions. So in the middle of the night, we went down to McGee, and one of the babies, no, they got everything situated. Everything was fine. I was all worried because I was missing an ultrasound that day. So I was really upset. And they told me, don't worry, before you leave, we'll go do an ultrasound. Everything's fine. So that morning we went down to the ultrasound room. We still had an audience upstairs. My mom was still there. And Ken Kirby was there with my parents, and my dad was there, and did the ultrasound. And I knew something was wrong because the ultrasound tech left. And I told Ben, I said, they don't leave. I don't know what's going on, but they don't leave. So she left and a doctor came in and did more. And he told Ben, he used the phone, he called some code O. My parents had heard it upstairs and jokingly said, that better not be Lisa trying to scare us again. So the doctor put me in a wheelchair, told Ben to catch up or keep up or catch up, and flew me to the OR, where at this point I still had no idea what was going on.
They didn't say
They
anything
didn't
to
say
you.
anything of what was wrong. I didn't know if one of the babies was dead. I had no idea what was going on at this
But
point.
I'm sure your mind went to,
Oh yeah, my mind went to something's really wrong, like somebody,
right.
yeah. So they had no idea. We were in the OR. There's nurses flying around everywhere. One nurse is yelling at the other people to calm down because they were getting me all upset. And my doctor came in and she said, hey, everything's okay. The heart rate looks good now. And I said, well, what's going on? And she said, one of the babies, baby A, which is Michael, his heart rate had decelerated down in the during the ultrasound, and they were concerned. So they brought me up and she's like, we're just going to watch. We're not going to, we're going to leave and we're going to watch the rest of the day. So they took me out. We thought everything was good. We're like, oh, here we go. I had assumed at that point that I'd probably be hanging out there for a while.
Right.
So we had a bunch of people come down that day. And then about 8:00 that night, the doctor came in and said, so now baby B's acting kind of crazy. And
that's what happens when you have twins, Lisa.
And they said his heart rate's really decelerating, so we can do it the easy way and do it nice and calmly, or we can go for the circus way that we tried this morning. And if his heart rate decelerates too much. And I said, well, I didn't really enjoy the circus this morning, so let's just do it this calm, slow way.
Okay. So in other words, they were telling you one way or another, your babies are going to be born today.
Right. Either today, or they said maybe they could have pushed it till the next day if they would have done the circus way. But they said, we have to watch because it's too risky for them to stay.
Okay.
So the doctor came in, the NICU doctor came in at that point, one of the neonatologists, and gave me all the rundown of all the statistics, which listening to them now, it scares me. But at the time I had this, like, God was just there, and I had this peace that, like, everything was okay. Because they told me, there's a 10% risk that they will die, which isn't too much less than a typical birth, but that's still 10%. But there was a high rate that they would have learning disabilities, physical disabilities, and all that kind of stuff that goes with it. We knew they would have NICU time, but
you weren't quite prepared to hear that.
Right. Yeah. But I was okay. Like my husband said that he doesn't think I was processing things very well, but because normally I worry about everything.
Right. Well, that's just the peace of God, right?
Right. Exactly. So they were born that night at 9:31 and 9:35. Chris got a little stuck. So when he came out, he was very blue and very bruised. Michael was 2 pounds, 10 ounces, and Chris was 2 pounds, 9 ounces.
Oh my.
Chris was only 13 3/4 inches long. So he wasn't much bigger than a Barbie doll.
Oh my.
And everyone else got to see them. I got a peek. They held them up. Chris was blue, so they rushed him. I didn't even get to peek at him. I had to peek at Michael, and then they rushed Chris right away. Everyone else got to see them. My mom, Ben, my friend Lori, everyone got to see them. But me. I didn't get to see them that night until it was after midnight. So I didn't get to see them until the next day. Basically.
And now, were they giving you evaluations on the boys, how they were doing, or was it just a complete silence?
It was complete silence. The only thing I got was, Lori came up and showed me some pictures, and like that was all I had at that point. and my parents, everyone got to touch them because they weren't in the incubator yet. So everyone kind of got to touch them. And then I finally got to go down. They were already in the incubator when I saw them now.
Okay.
So,
all right. So then now after that, how was the time in the hospital there with the babies and everything going on?
so the hardest part was I didn't get to hold them for over a week.
Oh, wow.
So
Now,
that's
were you able to put your hands in
yeah. You can
those
put your hand
glove
in the little hole.
things?
You can put
Yeah.
your hand in the little hole.
Oh, okay.
The one day I got to pick one of them up like this while they changed the sheet under their bed. But it was about, I think it was 8 days before I got to hold them because they
Wow.
had IVs in their heads. And those are too easy to knock out when they're
Right.
when they're
Now, before we go on, how did you feel when you saw them with all of the wires hooked up and inside the
again, it was very surreal.
real?
I think now, I think looking back, I think it, I think I think I would handle it a lot different now, but I really had this like calm peace the whole time that like everything was okay. They were super tiny. And luckily the nurses were amazing and explained everything that was going on the whole time. But they were, they were definitely super, super tiny.
Well, and I do know a lot of people were praying.
They were.
And when people pray, God is answering, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's just awesome. Just a real quick side note: how was Ben doing through this whole situation?
I think he was okay. He didn't really say much to me. I think he knew that,
He didn't want to worry you, right?
Teetered over to the edge real quick of bad news.
Right.
Anxiety could have taken over real quick.
Oh, yeah.
But they did fairly well. They were what was considered in the NICU feeders and growers. They just needed to learn how to eat and they needed to grow. But we did have a lot of alarms. So they had what were called B's and D's, which were bradycardia issues where Michael liked those, where his heart would he just quit. His heart would just slow down to the point of an alarm going off. And Chris would decide he wasn't going to breathe. So they would take turns. They were in separate rooms. So I was in one room with one and Ben would be in the other room with the other. And you could see the alarm going off. It would show you what room the alarm was going off in. So I knew if it was one of my kids with an alarm. So I'd go over there and see what was going on. And it was, so the beeps and all the alarms kind of were a little challenging for a while to get used to.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And
and I'm just thinking because they were in the womb together for so long that here they were separated too. I can't imagine. Even, I mean, we don't know what babies think or go through, but I know I've seen pictures of twin babies and how they hold each other and hold each other's hands and everything. So I'm sure that was hard to know too, that one is in one room, one is in the other room.
And they weren't back together in the same room for 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, 5 or 6 weeks. They put them in a different pod where there's actually like light and dark to try to get them used to some cycles of daylight. And they were next to each other, and they actually could, like, I could hold them both at the same time, which was the first time that they had been together since they were born.
Okay, so how long did they stay in the hospital? Did they both get to go home at the same time? What?
So that's a crazy NICU journey. So the day that my mom and I were on the way to the hospital to see the boys, and I got a call from the NICU, which always like stops your heart. Like, oh no, what happened? And they said, so Michael is ready to come home, but you need to bring his car seat in today so we can do a car seat test. which was super exciting, but that meant that Chris was going to still be in the hospital. So Michael came home on February 23rd. So he had been there since January 6th to February 23rd.
Wow. And now let me just stop you a minute. You're going back and forth, right?
Yeah. So,
and now you've had a C-section also, right?
My dad took me every morning. We would leave the
goodness.
house around 7:30, 8 o'clock. My dad and I would go down. I couldn't drive for a while, so he drove me every morning. Then my dad and I would come home around 4, and then we would eat dinner real quick, and then Ben, my mom, and myself would go back down till around 9:30 at night.
Oh my goodness.
So that was every day until Michael came home. And then when Michael came home, Michael got to go with us to the NICU in the morning, which was, I'm sure, was a blast for him. He was stuck going with us, but we also had, since Michael liked his heart rate to decrease, Michael came home with a monitor that we had to carry around and plug in everywhere. So you couldn't just pick him up and go. You had a big bag on your shoulder that had a heart rate monitor on him, and he had stickers on himself all the time. And I had to keep it plugged in because the ride down, it was, almost an hour ride, and the battery only lasted about an hour and a half. So I had to plug him in on the car ride, so that on the car ride back and forth, he wouldn't lose his charge.
I can't. Now, physically, how were you feeling during this time?
I actually felt really good. I think I recovered from my C-section really well. And I was just really tired, but I think a lot of it was just the mental exhaustion and emotions going back and forth, and just constant. And, you don't eat right when you're trying to go back and forth, and,
right. You don't get any rest.
No.
Yeah. All right. So now Michael's home. When does Chris get to come home?
So Chris came home. So Chris was supposed to originally come home on the 25th. And then they said, you know what, he was going to come home with oxygen. So on the 26th of February, we get this big delivery of all these oxygen tanks, or on the 24th, we get these delivery of all these oxygen tanks and all this crazy stuff. And then the one nurse said, you know what, I think we can try him without the oxygen. So that's going to delay him coming home, but you won't have all this oxygen stuff at home, which sounded better to me than having now to have 2 monitors and oxygen tanks to drag. It sounded a little bit better. So
so let's remember, you have twins,
right?
This isn't just one baby we're talking about.
You have double twins. Monitors, double baby.
Oh my,
So so on the 28th of February, he came home, which we were super excited about. Everything was great. They did a physical before he left. Everything seemed fine. That night, when we laid down to sleep, I could hear him breathing, like really loudly. And I said to Ben, something's wrong. I don't know what, but something's wrong. And he said, what do you think we should do? I said, I think I'm going to have to take him back to the emergency room.
Oh, wow.
So that night I took him by myself because I thought I was going to be brave. And I took him by myself down to children.
And so Ben stayed with
Michael. Yeah.
And you went by yourself. You didn't call your mom?
I did call my mom, and my mom said, do you want me to go with you? And I said, no, I'm good. I'm fine. It's just probably nothing. So, I drove him down to Children's, and they said that he had pneumonia.
No.
And that he would need to stay in the NICU. And that's the time where I broke. Like I told them, I said, I can't do this again. Like I can't do 60 some days again. Like there's no way I can't do this. And I think emotionally, I kind of cut off there. They, Children's NICU was different than McGee's. Children's NICU was pretty, a lot colder. The babies weren't at McGee, you could dress them and put them in little pajamas. At Children's, they didn't do that. So I felt like we were back to stage one, because that's when, we had to get to certain spots to be able to dress them.
Right.
I felt like we were back to stage one.
Oh.
I think the doctors saw the disconnect. And about 2 days in, they asked if I wanted to transfer him back to McGee. And I said yes.
Yes. Oh, wow.
I knew the nurses there. And luckily, when we got back to McGee, we had this really amazing nurse. And she requested to have Chris all of her shifts that she could every time she was there.
Wow.
And she was just amazing, and just was this almost like this ray of sunshine for me, because she really helped to keep me calm and to readjust my thinking. Because the night I came home from the NICU, I was so upset. Like, I took his crib down, like I took his pack and play down. I thought that we were going to lose him, and I just couldn't.
Oh, wow.
So my mom had to come talk sense into me, because
Now at that time, well, and I love how God does that, though. It's not a coincidence that you got this nurse. And I know that there are nurses, and they are amazing. And I've heard so many stories, and I think in any unit, not just the NICU, but all nurses, they have a compassion. It's what they do, what they love to do. But it's no coincidence that God didn't give you a special nurse just designed for you, for what you needed at that moment. And I love how God does that. So you kind of spiraled down a little bit. Was there anything, were there any verses that, God gave you during this time as you were going through this difficult, I'm going to lose my baby?
So the whole process, I think, 1 Peter 5:7, kind of during that part, was really kind of touched me during that period of, because I, at that point, was not that was my point where, okay, I had given everything, and then I felt like, okay, now I just can't do this. So that's where that verse really, I'm like, okay, wait, okay, God, I'm going to give you everything now again, and take care of this. And luckily, and prayerfully, so many people were praying for those babies, and it did work for us.
So 1 Peter 5:7 says, give all your worries and cares to God, for he cares about you. And I'm sure you had a lot of worries and a lot of cares, and just to keep reminding yourself that God cares about you. He cares about the boys. And okay, so now you're at the hospital. When was Chris able to go back home?
Well, Chris spent another 7 days there, so we came home on March 8th.
Okay. Now, were you continuing doing the same thing, taking Michael down to the hospital, staying all day?
Michael wasn't allowed to go to the hospital.
Wow.
So, which made it more difficult.
Complicated,
because Chris had pneumonia, Michael wasn't allowed to go back. So Michael would go with my dad, but Michael would go with us, but Michael had to stay in the waiting room in the front of the hospital with my dad.
Okay.
So he was with us, but not really. So my dad and Michael would wait in the waiting room. I would go back with Chris. And then in the evening, my mom would stay with Michael while I went down with Chris.
Wow. And awesome that you had your parents and the support that you had to help you through this. So was Chris the only one that had issues, as being a preemie?
No. So unfortunately, they did have lovely preemie lungs. And the first year we had, I can't even tell you how many visits to the emergency room and the doctors, and we had bronchitis and bronchiolitis and everything under the sun. But New Year's Day, which was a year, they were almost a year old. Michael sounded horrible. So we went to the ER, my dad and I, because I didn't go to the ER by myself anymore. I was all done. I
You
still don't go
learned,
to,
right?
I still don't go to the ER by myself. But New Year's Day, we spent New Year's Day at the ER. Michael had RSV. So, which is really dangerous for babies. He had, for especially preemies, he had received his RSV vaccine because preemies can get that, but he still had RSV. So he spent 5 days in the hospital on oxygen and all that fun stuff again. And luckily,
So Chris is home.
Chris is home, yeah.
Michael's in the hospital.
Michael's in the hospital, yeah. Chris we had taken him to the ER too at that point, but they didn't admit him. He was okay. So it was a back and forth circus. I think my mom brought him to the ER. I was with Michael. It was a little bit crazy, that too. We luckily were able to come home the day before his first birthday. So he didn't have to spend his first birthday in the hospital.
Oh my goodness. That is crazy. So that first year was a lot of going to the hospital, emergency room, difficult times, and your babies are small and they're, you're trying to help them grow and get bigger and everything. So now after they're a year old, now what's your life like?
So they were doing
better, right?
They did get better. So the boys were blessed with early intervention from the time they came home. So they had a physical therapist that came to the house. Chris had what was called torticollis, which is common in twins, where his neck was kind of to the one side a little bit. But that's real common in twins. So we had a great physical therapist named Eric who came. Because of what I do, working with kids with special needs, was like crazy about getting a speech therapist. They wouldn't let me get one until they were like 15 months old. But we had an amazing speech therapist who grew to be our really close friend from the time they were 15 months to the time they were 3. And we had an occupational therapist. We had all these people coming in and out of our house. We had to follow up with ophthalmologist because preemies can have what's called retinopathy at prematurity, where their retinas go all haywire. Okay. We didn't have that, but Chris had an enlarged optic nerve, which they told us could possibly be childhood glaucoma. So we had to follow with that every 6 months. And thankfully and prayerfully, that resolved itself and it's gone. So we didn't have, luckily nothing happened with that, which was scary.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
And then
now, do either of the boys have glasses or wear glasses or needed to have glasses?
They had glasses for a real short time, but they don't need them now. They both,
praise God, yeah, that's awesome.
And Chris developed asthma. Michael had pneumonia at 3, and we were back in the hospital for another 10 days. Wow. So Michael had a lot of the pneumonia stuff, and Chris just developed a chronic asthma, where we've spent up until last year, we've spent many, many, many nights in the ER, and many, many, many times at Children's Express. And it's kind of sad when they know you by name.
They know you by name and they go, "Oh, hi, you back."
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah.
Last year, what was really during COVID, I was concerned because of Chris with asthma, and
right.
I didn't want anything. So they wanted us to follow up with a pulmonologist. Again, he hadn't had his lung function test for about a year. So they wanted to do another lung function test. And when they did the lung function test, this would have been during COVID. Yeah. So like not last March, but the March before, they found out that his asthma is gone. So
wonder how that happened.
Yeah. So luckily, I mean, God really saw us through all those early days and finally took us to the place where the boys are healthy and you
And
know.
it's been a struggle, I'm sure. I know that you have another verse that you wanted to share with us. How does this fit into your life? I'm going to
So
throw it up on the screen here.
I really feel like this fits in across everything for us, from, you know, from having the babies and not being in my time, which, I like things to happen when I want them to happen. So
Right. I think we all do.
yeah. And I feel like this is really, a message that I've carried with me for a long time. And just knowing that God knows the plans, and they're good. And
Right, right. Wow. So let's just read that verse, Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. Now, I do know also that it's been a constant doctor visits, constant different things going on, and now the boys are in fifth grade. And
mhm,
so how what would you say to a mom that perhaps has struggles and difficulties with sickly children, the children not being healthy, because that puts a lot of stress on you, a lot of worry, a lot of fretting. And I know the verse that we just talked about, I'm sure, brought you comfort. And First Peter 5:7,
mhm,
I'm sure, has been a constant
mhm,
for you to just give all your worries to him. But as a mother, I loved how you brought in your story how you sensed something was wrong, because that's just how God has wired moms, and
mhm.
they have that sense of knowing their child and knowing something's not quite right. So, what would you say to somebody who may be struggling with the same things you have gone through?
I think the most important thing is to find other people who understand.
Mm.
That was really important for me. I had Ben had a friend who had babies that had been in the NICU, and a good friend of mine had twins that were in the NICU, and having those moms to kind of reach out to when things were kind of rough, and having some support from those people really helped, because they had been there, done that, and they knew, the NICU is kind of like a roller coaster, and even having preemies later is kind of a roller coaster that you don't ever get off of for a
Mhm.
while. And just having a big army behind you of people that are praying. I remember Elizabeth Ann Caldwell, when the boys came to church for the first time, she said, I feel like these are the church's babies. We've prayed for
Aw.
them so much. And Chris used to sit with the Caldwells in church when he was little for the longest time.
You thought he
Um,
belonged to them, right?
yeah, yeah. But I really feel like, having my church family pray for those babies for so long,
Mhm.
and just having, kind of an army of people praying for them really helped us tremendously.
That's such wise counsel, to not try to do things on your
Mhm,
own, which sometimes often you can do. Or I think sometimes moms feel like, well, I can't call somebody again. I can't ask them to help me again. I can't
mhm,
ask for, but that's so wrong. You know, God has designed us in such a way that we encourage one another and that we help each other. That's very wise counsel. Well, I know I have the privilege. I know not everybody that's listening to the broadcast has the privilege to see your boys. But I saw their pictures today on Facebook and saw
mhm.
that they were in fifth grade. And I'm like, wow, God has just been so faithful. And has walked with you and Ben through this situation. And it's not easy. I can't imagine. I know Missy, um, Ellie had RSV for in the beginning. And it's a scary thing.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
very scary. And she wasn't a preemie. So I can't imagine where, I mean, your thoughts could just go to the worst,
Mhm.
if not for, like you said, God's peace and
Right.
God's comfort and watching over you. Well, thank you so much, Lisa,
Mhm.
for sharing your story with us. Is there anything else you want to share or end with that is on your heart?
No, no, can't
You
think of
think
it.
that's it? Okay, so what I would like to do, and I like to end the broadcast with praying for somebody who may be watching the broadcast and may be pregnant with twins, not knowing what to expect, or may have a child, even if they're not preemies. You can have sickly children
Mhm.
who are constantly sick or in the hospital. Or even if you have a child that is per se healthy, but we have COVID going on, we have pneumonia, we have the flus, we have all of the, childhood diseases that are kind of coming back around and everything. So there can be a lot of fear, and there can be a lot of worry and a lot of care. So I just want to, first of all, throw your verse back up there, 1 Peter 5:7, to give all your cares and worries to God. Um, as Lisa so beautifully showed us. And it's what you went through wasn't easy. And I know that if you could tell people it wasn't it's not like, I'm such a strong person that I just got through this. You're a normal person who has worries and cares and concerns.
I worry about
So
everything on a normal daily basis. So it definitely wasn't me during all that NICU
yeah.
time. It was definitely
And
not
and
me.
and see, that's what I love watching, because I know you, and I know many people know you and have watched you. Just watch God's faithfulness, and giving you courage and strength, and Ben also, to walk through this, and your parents.
Mhm.
Um, I know as a grandparent, it's not easy to watch your children go through difficult, things and complicated things. So again, I would like to just pray for some of the women, or all of the women actually, that are watching. So let's just join our hearts together and pray for them,
Mhm.
okay?
Mhm.
Father, we just thank you for this time. I thank you for Lisa, and I thank you for Ben and the boys, Chris and Michael, and for Lisa's parents, Bob and Sis. I thank you, Father, for this family. I thank you for your faithfulness, for keeping them and for helping them and watching over them through these past years of health issues and being in the hospital, in and out of the hospital constantly. And we just thank you that we can cast our cares on you, and that you do care about us. And so, Father, I pray for anyone that might be watching today, who may be going through a struggle or a complicated thing. And it doesn't even have to be a health issue, but going through something with their children. I just ask, Father, that you would just put your arms around them, that you would comfort them, that they would sense your presence, and sense that you do care, that you do love them, and that they can just bring all of their cares and all of their concerns to you, because you're a faithful God, you're a loving God, you're a God who cares. And so I just ask, Father, that you would encourage their hearts. And for any women that might be watching today, I just ask, Father, that you would just bless them, encourage them, and just thank you for this time together. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Well, Lisa, once again, I want to thank you for joining us and sharing your story. And I just want to remind all of you women that are watching that if you have friends, or you know somebody that this broadcast could help or encourage, that you would just share it on Facebook or YouTube, that you would invite them to watch this broadcast. And just also to remind you that once a month we do the Moments with Moms, and we will be having another special guest on November 6th, which is Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. So I hope that you will mark your calendars and join us. And thank you so much for just tuning in today. And thank you again, Lisa. And God bless you. And we'll see you next month. Good night.